The BMP infantry fighting vehicle appeared in the 60s and became the first mass-produced IFV, thus making a real breakthrough in the field of military equipment. These tail beasts combine the functions of armored personnel carrier, fire support, and infantry protection on a battlefield, bringing military doctrines around the world to a whole new level. The BMP can swim and can even parachute from an airplane. It is truly a unique vehicle. However, today, the BMP is the most despised vehicle in the entire Russian army. It is hated in both infantry and tank troops. Soldiers dream of getting rid of it, and even the most modern modifications do not help. But what is the reason? So, in the early 50s, with the advent of nuclear weapons, the concept of war in all leading countries radically changed. It was assumed that infantry would now have to travel kilometers over contaminated ground. At the time, the only vehicles that were prepared for radiation conditions were tanks. But they were obviously not enough. Equipping infantry with ordinary armored personnel carriers was no longer possible either. In addition to the introduction of weapons of mass destruction, the armies of the leading countries began to equip the infantry with a large number of automatic and anti-tank weapons of close-quarters combat. This meant that the infantry needed a vehicle that would increase its firepower and significantly improve its defense. Thus, in 1959, the USSR began developing a new type of vehicle, which for the first time would be classified as an infantry fighting vehicle, called the BMP-1. The new vehicle not only provided protection from radiation and quick delivery of infantry, but also increased the firepower of battalions, their ability to move off-road, and could cover the soldier during deployment. The BMP received a 2A28 73mm gun, a 7.62 caliber PKT machine gun, and a 9M15M rocket launcher to fight against tanks. However, the BMP-1 had many weaknesses. Its main gun had rather low accuracy and rate of fire, and the loading mechanism was not reliable enough. But even in working order, it was semi-automatic, so the gunner still had to participate in reloading. In addition, the maximum elevation angle of the gun was insufficient. This problem was particularly acute during the war in Afghanistan, where the Mujahideen ambushed convoys of Soviet vehicles from high mountains. As a result, it was decided to modernize this vehicle. Thus, in 1980, the BMP-2 appeared. It got better vision, it received a night sight and a laser rangefinder, and the 93mm gun was replaced by a 30mm gun. Despite the reduction in caliber, this was to the benefit of the BMP. The new gun had better accuracy and higher angle of elevation, so it could now fire even at an airborne target. All this, of course, increased the effectiveness of the combat vehicle, but in general did not save its reputation. What's wrong with the BMP? Why do Russian soldiers hate it? First of all, it has terribly bad armor. It cannot protect the crew in the event of a mine explosion, a primitive explosive device, or an RPG-7 shot. And these are weapons available even to guerrillas, let alone full-fledged armies. That's why soldiers prefer to sit on top of armor, hoping that the bullet won't hit them. Anything is better than almost guaranteed death inside the vehicle. But why did the Soviets let it fail so badly? The fact is that the USSR did not model a situation where rapidly advancing infantry would get into skirmishes with a heavily armed enemy. They thought that good protection from shrapnel and hit from a Browning 50 caliber machine gun would be enough. It was assumed that due to its low silhouette, the BMP would skillfully use the faults of the terrain, avoiding enemy direct fire, and in the event of a surprise encounter with tanks, the ATGM would be sufficient. In fact, at the time this concept was quite justified. However, it lost its relevance very quickly. How does the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle, for example, differ from a BMP? Here, the idea of vehicle floatability, even with the use of separate mountable devices, were abandoned almost immediately. In modern conditions, it is more effective to use a pontoon crossing than to become an easy floating target. In the water, the BMP moves much slower, and there is nowhere to hide from the enemy. In addition, it is very difficult to steer in the water, and there is a good chance that the vehicle will simply roll over and lose control. The M2 Bradley is half a meter taller than a BMP and twice as heavy. It can swim and can be parachuted from an airplane, but it will do the most important thing. it will transport our soldiers safe and sound. M2 Bradley armor is not just rolled homogeneous armor. It's a whole combination of composite materials, steel, aluminum alloys, and ceramic plates. The second problem with the BMP is the extremely low crew protection. Even if the Bradley is hit, the probability that the crew will be unharmed is incomparably higher than that of the BMP. The Bradley has improved protection of the underside from mines and IEDs, and the internal compartment of the troop is made with the use of shock absorption systems, which increases protection against impact. The third major problem of the BMP is its size. Even the most modern BMP-3 has a now dated fire control system. Its sight has low visibility and has no thermal imaging channel, only night vision. At the same time, when it is in active mode, it makes the BMP visible by producing a large infrared spot. The system is also incapable of capturing, tracking, and displaying the target on a screen, let alone transmitting information to any common unit system. Since the war in Afghanistan, the BMP has been nicknamed the mass grave of infantry, and during the war in Chechnya, its reputation sank even lower. At the time, the new BMP-3 appeared, and it was hastily delivered to the troops. All in all, compared to the BMP-2, it was improved only in terms of armament. A 100mm gun was added to the 30mm gun. At the same time, the elevation angle of the turret was again reduced, as one of the BMP-1. In the end, this resulted in huge losses. This is what makes Russian soldiers hate and fear this vehicle. The BMP is a monstrously unbalanced vehicle. On the one hand, there's a huge amount of armament, on the other hand, there's a super thin armor that cannot withstand even the most primitive IEDs or hit from an RPG. Interestingly, the BMP has an alternative in Russia. The most popular one is the Kurganets 25 BMP. It has heavy armor and ammunition load that is isolated from the crew and offers better protection for the troopers inside. Basically, it's a Russian project similar to the M2 Bradley. However, this IFE has been in development for years, and nobody knows if it's ever going to appear at all. That's all for today. Thank you all for watching. Friends, if you like this episode, don't forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. Have a good day. See you next week.